Lucy Robin, sweet Emma Rose. Tell me everything I need to know. La 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 la, la la la. La 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 la, la la la.
Thank you so much. This is not something that happens often in my working life. I don't start most Friday mornings watching a band called the Hornby Band playing one of my favourite songs. And I want you to think of me next Monday, because at 5 a.m. your time, I go back to work. I become a writer again. I haven't been a writer much the last few months, what with one thing and another. And by about, I'm guessing, 11 a.m. your time, I will be sick of myself, completely despairing. I'll have thrown away most things that I've tried to write that day. And I forget most of the time that I have a body of work, that something that you guys have been very kindly looking at and thinking about and reading. It doesn't feel like a body of work to me. It feels like something that was written page by page with a great deal of misery and swearing and smoking. So it's nice to come to something like this and think, well, maybe I did achieve something, and I'm going to hold on to that on Monday. So thank you. So that's the first reason. I have to write to look after my family. Second reason is I have to write. And that means I'm compelled to write. I can't do anything about it. And another question we get asked a lot is, what advice do you have for young writers? And I think my advice normally is, can you stop? Because if you can stop, you should stop. If you can't stop, then you're a writer. That's the only difference. It doesn't matter whether you're published or unpublished or good or bad or what kind of writing you do. The thing that distinguishes writers from non-writers is that writers can't do anything about it. And it made me unhappy for quite a long time that I couldn't do anything about it, because I guess when I left university and my friends started to get jobs in the BBC or in law firms or all of this sort of thing, I wasn't earning anything, and they were the ones that had to buy me pizzas, and it became increasingly embarrassing when I reached the age of 30 that I had no money whatsoever, and that I was persisting with this notion that I wanted to write. They all felt a bit sorry for me, I think, and I felt sorry for myself, but there wasn't anything I could do. I had to keep trying, and eventually ended up here. And one of the ways I waste time is I waste time on the internet. I end up looking for music a lot, and of course the internet is pretty much full of music. Music and pornography is all there is on the internet. And I started downloading songs I liked and going from one music blog to the next music blog. And while I was wasting that time, it began to occur to me that since I wrote High Fidelity in 1995, everything about music has changed. There are no record stores anymore, pretty much. And music is ceasing to become a physical thing. It exists in a sort of ethereal form on the internet. We email songs to each other. And if you'd told me when I was 17 or 18 that in the future you'd be able to send songs almost remotely from one person to another via the airwaves, I wouldn't literally have understood how that could have happened. I would have said, well, and what else? Can you send sandwiches in this way? Because a record was a thing, and a CD was a thing, and a cassette was a thing. How could this thing become nothing? And how could music be reduced in this way to these digits or whatever it is? I don't really understand it. And I started to think about that, how much had changed in music. So that was an important part that went into Juliet Naked. Juliet Naked is partly about the internet. Maybe I should tell you a little bit about the story of the book. For those of you who haven't read it, it's about 3 people. 2 of them, they're a couple who live in a really horrible seaside town in England. We've got a lot of horrible seaside towns in England. The top half of England, which is pretty cold and wet. It has a long coast along the east coast, and you'd be insane, I think, to spend your summer holidays there now. But in the 19th century, that's what working people did. They went to these seaside towns, dressed up warm, walked up and down. Since then, we all go to Spain or Italy because it's really, really cheap and it's sunny. So these seaside towns have almost become redundant over the last, I guess, 50, 60 years. And this couple live in one of these sad, slightly depressed seaside towns. One of them's a teacher, one of them works in a museum. And Duncan, the teacher, he's obsessed with a singer-songwriter, a guy called Tucker Crowe, who made a couple of albums at late 70s to the mid 80s and then completely disappeared, stopped working, stopped giving interviews, just went off, and no one's heard of him since. So on the internet, a group of fans gather and talk a lot about Tucker Crowe and about his music. He's a kind of a Dylan figure, I guess. And again, that's something that's changed, because in the 70s or the 80s, if you liked Tucker Crowe and you lived in a seaside town, you're on your own. There's no one to talk to. But now, of course, you can talk all day and all night to people in Australia, people in America, whoever you want to, about the object of your obsession. And it keeps obsessions going, the internet. It makes you feel as though there are millions of people interested in this thing, but of course it's not millions, it's just a few hundred. When I turned 20, I went around saying, oh my God, I'm so old, I'm 20. And then when I turned 30, I did the same. When I turned 40, I did the same. 50, I stopped doing it because it wasn't a joke anymore. When I was 20, it was a joke. Oh God, I'm so old. 50, it isn't a joke, I'm old and I am going to die. And that was the first time I'd felt it. Now, around about the time that I started feeling this, my 6-year-old son started feeling it too. He didn't think he was getting old, but he did work out for the first time that we're all going to die. And it's a very difficult time when you're a parent dealing with a child who's discovered this, because this was, I guess, 2007, and he'd say things like, are we all going to be alive in 2008? And I said, well, I hope so. Yeah, I mean, we got a good chance. We got a good shot of making it. He said, what about 2009? I said, yep, good chance. I think we're going to make it to 2009. What about the year 3000? I said, nope, all gone. And he burst into tears. He said, really? I said, I wish I could tell you different, but by the year 3000, we'll all be gone. And he started to get nightmares about it, and it's very hard to deal with. So I notice it says in your one of your corridors that I am an atheist, which is true. But when I was talking to my 6-year-old, I suddenly realised the usefulness of God and heaven, and I said, but it's okay because we'll all be going to heaven, so we'll see you there. And he said, really? I said, oh, yeah. He said, well, we'll all be in heaven. I said, yeah, we'll all be in heaven, it's fine. And it consoled him. And, of course, the great value of religion is consolation. So we were a very happy Christian family for that year period, I think, where it made me feel better and it made him feel better. Tucker Crowe, in the little page I'm going to read you, is shopping in the supermarket. He hasn't really done anything of any value with his life for quite a long time, but he's got this 6-year-old son, like my 6-year-old son. And they're shopping in a supermarket for a daughter that he doesn't really know. It turns out that he has children scattered around all over the place, 5 kids by 4 different mums, and he has a really bad relationship with 4 of the 5. He has one good relationship with the young lad. So they're in a supermarket, Tucker and his son Jackson. What are you doing, Dad? Well, I don't know whether she eats meat or not. Well, why wouldn't she eat meat? Well, because some people believe that eating meat is wrong, and other people believe it's bad for you, and some people believe both. Well, what do we believe? Well, I guess we believe both, but we don't care enough to do anything about it. Why do some people believe it's bad for you? Well, they think it's bad for your heart. There was no point in talking to Jackson about the colon. So your heart could just stop beating if you ate meat. But you eat meat, Dad. There was a tremulous note of panic in Jackson's voice, and Tucker cursed under his breath. He'd walked right into this one like a sucker. Jackson had recently discovered that his father was going to die at some point in the first half of the 21st century, and his premature grief could be unleashed at any time by anything, including the main tenets of vegetarianism. What made it worse was that Jackson's existential despair had both coincided with and bolstered Tucker's own. His 55th birthday seemed to have sparked a particularly acute bout of melancholy that he couldn't see being lifted too much by any of the birthdays to come. I don't eat so much meat. That's a lie, Dad. You eat tons. You had bacon this morning and you cooked burgers last night. Well, I said it's what some people believe, Jack. I didn't say it was true. Well, so why do we believe it if it's not true? We believe that the Phillies are going to win the World Series every year, but that's not true either. I never believed that. You just tell me to believe that. He put the hot dogs back on the shelf one last time and ushered Jackson over to the chicken. Chicken was neither pink nor orange, and he was able to tell Jackson of its health-giving properties without feeling like too much of a liar.